You're listening to A Seat at the Tech Table, a podcast by Sisters in Tech, hosted by Anna and Esther Kofariji. This podcast highlights the experiences of Black women working and thriving in the tech industry. You'll learn about how they found their paths into tech, and hopefully you'll be inspired to consider whether there's a seat for you at the tech table.
Thank you so much, Nikkia, for joining us. Welcome to A Seat at the Tech Table. We'd love you to just introduce yourself to the listeners, tell us who you are and what you do.
Well, hi, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for having me. It is my pleasure to be here. My name is Nikkia Reveillac, and I currently head up the research team at Twitter. Within a broader organization that is design and research. And, our job is to try and create the most compelling, seamless, enjoyable, human-centered experience on the platform possible. And so I look forward to this conversation. Thank you again for having me.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
So one of the things we want to get across to our listeners is that you can find a route into tech no matter where you start. We learned that you have a background in dance, which is amazing. How did you connect the dots between dance and research? They seem like polar opposites, so it'll be interesting to know.
Yeah, no, it is not something that I intended. I think a lot of life is very much unpredictable. And for many, many years, I did want to pursue dance. I think that the thing that has perhaps helped me, and I could frame it that way, is my desire to want to move audiences and to want to impact them in some sort of way. And so even though I'm not technically dancing in any of the conversations that I have, though I am very animated, if you speak with anybody who I work with, I think this connection with people, and in dance, it was using the power of music to move my body, to create shapes that would make the audience feel something, to walk away, in some way changed. And I think the work that we do in research is very much to understand whatever the topic is, whatever the challenge is, so deeply, and then surface that knowledge in a way that makes people feel something, want to act differently, want to think differently about a particular topic. And so I think that there is that through line that has remained, but my unique way of expressing it is very emotional. And so I think throughout my career, it's in tech now, but even before, I really felt compelled to tell these stories, to create these narratives for whatever piece of research I had done that almost moved off the slide. And so it's colorful. It is a rich tapestry of both data and insights. And I try as best as I can to make people feel moved by the work that I do, all with the end goal of creating a better outcome. And at Twitter, it's always very much thinking about how to make the platform better.
Okay. So could you tell us a little bit about how you got into your current role?
That's a really wonderful story, actually. I like telling this one. So the current role that I have is not the one that I interviewed for. I really, really wanted to move into tech for a variety of reasons from where I was in consumer products, because I was looking to be disrupted. And I wanted to be in a space where the product that I was working on was the brand, if that makes sense. And went on a journey to really find not just a tech company, but a company whose values I believed in, because it was values that I held near and dear to my heart. And so, I started really by trying to get as familiar as possible with the social media landscape from where I was. So at the time I was at Colgate-Palmolive, and during 2014-15, when everybody was being disrupted by technology, there was the call to answer this one question. If we're going to spend a portion of our budget to market our campaigns for toothpaste and soap in social media, where should it be? And I rose my hand. I was like, absolutely want to be part of this. I want to understand how we make these decisions, what do you get out of Facebook? What do you get out of spending with YouTube? And to be quite honest, Twitter wasn't really in a lot of the conversations, but the whole space fascinated me. And so I led what we call this Digital Insights Task Force back in Colgate. And our job was to, above and beyond our day jobs, provide guidelines for marketers who were trying to allocate their money across social media. And at that time, it was like 20% of their budget. And so even before I had said, I want to move into tech, I was sort of getting these skills, getting familiar with this space of advertising technology and really becoming familiar with the various companies. The decision to move to Twitter was specifically, and there were a few companies that I looked at. Twitter was in the mix. Was really a result of me saying, again, what are the values I wanted? And it moved away from I want to be in tech to like I want to be in a home where I feel as though my desire to want to leave something better than I found it, my passion for developing and coaching talent and people, my relentless curiosity and a permission around me to be able to pursue whatever it is I felt would help me sort of scratch that itch. And I think finally a real sense of inclusivity and diversity that wasn't just on paper, but was being manifested in the way that people were not only being hired, but promoted. And, the moment that I started talking to Twitter, they were like, look, the role that you're interviewing for is in San Francisco, but we want people to be where they're happy, where they thrive, where they're with community. And I said, well, that's New York for me. And so that for me alone was a sign that they weren't just sort of talking about this idea of like diversity and bringing in people from different walks of life, but they were really living it. And so the journey began with a reach out. I was very surprised that I got a call back because my career was not in tech. But I think a lot of the things that I talked about, nurturing people through coaching, building strong teams, leaving things better. I had so much evidence of having done that in my prior career that I think that was the thing that made the team at Twitter say, she'd be a good fit. What I didn't know is that when I got the job that I interviewed for, which was then director of revenue research or research for our revenue products, which made perfect sense because it has to do with these ad products that my old company would frequently buy. I didn't realize that I was doing things to try and make the entire company better, the research team better, the design practice better by simply asking questions, challenging existing assumptions. I think those things were noticed. So when my predecessor left the company in June, I had the opportunity to interview for this role, and I'm very humbled and honored and excited to have stepped into the head of research role. So that's the journey in a nutshell.
Nice.
I'd love to step back because there's something that you said that I found quite interesting. When you spoke about kind of your earlier career at Colgate-Palmolive, and you said that the question came up about spending the social media budget, and you raised your hand. And I'd love to kind of dig into that a little bit because I think it's interesting that probably most of us have at least one opportunity like that in our career to maybe step out of our kind of normal job and have to raise our hand to take on a new opportunity. But I think maybe confidence or just perception of not having the requisite skills sometimes holds people back. So I'd love you to kind of talk about the mechanics, I guess, of raising your hand in those kind of situations.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is a function of a couple of things. So part of it is the personality. And if you have the personality to want to like fix things and to tinker with things on the side, regardless as to whether somebody has said, can you please do this, then it's easier. And I think I'd always been that person who, in retrospect, I can sort of piece it together. In the moment, I wasn't aware I was doing it, but there was this is your job. And then there are the things that you hear in meetings and you're like, that seems off. I'm going to do my own side, whatever. And so there was always that pattern with me. I think for people who are like, well, I don't know how to raise my hand, or I'm not sure, I think the question that I've posed to them, people who have mentored, is, well, what do you have to lose? And there are different ways in which you could raise your hand. You could be the leader of said side task force, or you could be a participant. And I think early in career, I happened to have this incredible manager and mentor who said, this is your way to network, right? Because there are opportunities to liaise with people within a company who you don't work with day to day. And so for getting impact for now or career growth, this is a wonderful way to start to stretch your skills in teamwork, collaboration, influence and negotiation, prioritizing your time, right? Like, if you were a kid and you had like A levels that you were studying for, then and danced on the side, which was my life, you're used to trying to find time to do the extra. And so my manager and mentor, when I first started, very much supported this and positioned it as an opportunity to start rounding out the soft skills. I brought a lot of those just because I was a dancer and I used to talk to people, and I understood that part of showing up is being like a nice person and making sure that people wanted to be with you. But beyond that, there are things that you glean or you get from these experiences. And so it was positioned that way. And it, as a result, wasn't terrifying. And so, some of the things that I did, I remember I would have meetings with my manager. And this was often at the beginning of the year where we had to talk about our goals, right? Here are the things that we have that we want to accomplish that are above and beyond the functional things of, I'm going to be helping to do this many studies or help this product or whatever. And I appreciated those conversations because it was a chance for her to say, okay, great. You want to get more experience with X. I will keep an ear out and an eye out for, these task force, these initiatives that I'm aware of because I'm more senior that I'm going to sort of help you get into. As I progressed in my career, I had more awareness of these things. So I had such a network that I could say, hey, I heard you're working on XYZ. I'd love to participate. The example with the digital explosion, that was one where I had already attained some level of seniority. So it was easier for me to say, I'm going to email a few managers, some of whom are in research, others are in product, others are in, research and development. And I will ask them if they could volunteer some of their highest potential people for this task force. And I tried to kind of come up with a sort of sexy sounding challenge statement, which was, how do we identify best practices for allocating your media budget when social media needs to be a part of this? And I think they were all interested because they were given this mandate of it should be 20%, but they were like, well, how, where? Is it all on Facebook? Do we, so it was very nascent. They didn't know. And so they appreciated the help. But I think that would be my advice for anybody listening who's like, it sounds terrifying. And how do I begin? Where do I lend a hand? I think if you have a manager you trust, it begins with that conversation. I'm interested in, it could be getting to know more people in my organization, having more insight into how the business is run. And it should be your manager's job to then say, all right, let me pair you with a finance manager so you can have a couple of shadowing days where you really understand the key measures that the company looks at. If your manager isn't that proactive, I think it's up to you to really try your best to network and ask yourself the question, well, what do I have to lose? I think the internet makes it very easy to send an email. Be prepared that like sometimes you won't get a response, but I think you only have yourself to hold accountable if you do nothing. And so that's the bottom line. Just do it. Send the email, cross your fingers, and then take it from there.
Cool. Amazing.
So you've mentioned a couple of times why mentoring is important. So you've mentioned a couple of times why is mentoring important for someone who wants to develop their career?
It's been like the honey in my oatmeal. It's been like the sugar in my coffee. It is the thing that I think is so incredibly important, and it's been the difference in my life, to be quite honest. it's essential to just have someone who you can trust, who is able to see in you the things that perhaps you're not seeing in yourself. And I'm going to be really clear with the difference for me between mentorship and like sponsorship. And early in career, you know, sometimes you're blessed with a manager who is a mentor, a manager who's able to use the language that mentors use, almost like a therapist, helping you articulate what's already within you, right? Like oftentimes we have the answers. Director, you know, somebody who tells you what to do, right? You come to them with a question and they're like giving you the answer. I wouldn't call a mentor, but a manager who's a mentor is able to say, okay, so I heard that problem. How might you answer it, right? Or, okay, so I see what you're feeling and it sounds like this particular individual has been challenging. Let's assume for a second that you were talking to a friend. How might you coach, you know, so you're really bringing it out in that person. So in the instances where you really don't have a mentor, you don't have that relationship with your boss, it feels awkward to sort of like get the advice that is not necessarily work related, but it's like personality conflicts. And I think in your first few moments of entering a new company or team, part of your job is to really kind of listen and observe. And so in rooms and in spaces where you are able to see other people exhibiting some of the behaviors that you're like, wow, like this person is able to push back in a really respectful way. Or I've noticed that, you know, anytime this person speaks, the room falls silent and everyone listens. And I have a hard time, or I feel nervous about that. I don't think I have that level of command. Same advice as I gave before, it doesn't hurt to reach out. And the one thing that you don't need to do is say, can you be my mentor? I think those are relationships that really should form organically. Of course, there are situations where there are formal mentoring programs, but in my life, it's been very organic, right? So if you are thinking about the way to sort of reach out, it's as simple as, you know, reaching out to a stranger in a park who is sitting on a bench. Hey, I noticed that you were fill in the blanks. Can I sit with you? And in the case of somebody who you're like looking at on the side, you're kind of nervous. You want to talk to them. In the back of your head, you're like, I want to learn from this person's experience. I feel like they have a lot to offer me. You don't have to say, hey, you know, can you be my mentor? It could be, hey, you know, in that meeting, there was heated debate. I noticed that, you know, you paused, reflected, and then when you spoke, had such a command of the room that I was in awe. And I myself, and then, you know, bring it back to you, feel quite nervous because I feel like I don't have authority because I'm too junior, or I don't have enough facts yet. And so everything I feel is a hunch, and I don't feel like I have permission to have a hunch in these spaces. You know, do you mind if I set up 30 minutes just so, you know, we could talk through it? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And that could be the beginning of it. And you do that for every person who you've encountered that you believe has something that would be beneficial to you. And some of the relationships last, right? It's often a result of both parties, the mentor and the mentee, wanting to keep in touch. And others, you know, they serve a purpose in that moment in time, and you let it be, just like in life.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's exceedingly important because I think so much of work, and it's always been this way, but I think it's becoming even more so these days, is about how you navigate like people, their, you know, oddities and quirks and politics. And those are things that you don't really get taught in school. And so you can either burn, right, as you try out different things, or, you know, try some things and reach out to other people who've been through it and can say, you know what, I wouldn't take this too seriously. Or, you know, in my case, I've gotten a lot of mentorship just in the art of like believing in myself, you know, like it's taken me a long time to be able to even own the goodness that I bring. And it's not because I think I'm awful. It's just that I'm so used to heads down working hard that when people come to me and they say like, you are inspiring or whatever, I'm like very surprised, even to this day.
Okay, so
You're working at one of the most important companies in the world in the middle of the pandemic. Tell me what an average day looks like for you.
Within a day, it could be very different, but I think there are some things that are consistent. So an average day for me, I'll start by just giving you context that I care very deeply about people and talent and, giving back to anybody who I see elements of my old self in. I mean, I'll give back to anybody, but I think anybody who's like a hustler and reaching out. And so my calendar is chock full of one-on-ones with people on my team and people who I don't know, I haven't met, who reached out by LinkedIn or Twitter and said, I am interested in pursuing a career. Can we talk? So that is a part of the fabric of every day, right? Every day is like meeting somebody new. But generally, I wake up and I have 2 young daughters, 4 and 7. And the first little sliver of the morning, what I try to do is get like a little walk around the block because I literally will not see outside for the rest of the day. That's a new habit. Just to sort of like see trees, let my eye extend beyond my screen. And, I come back, interact with my girls, and I say goodbye. And then I'm like heads down, usually in one-on-ones. But there are often competing things happening. And I'm having a challenging time. I'm not afraid to sort of reveal this. Balancing the intensity of like fully being present for people with the constancy, the constant nature of like Slack and messages that pull you into day-to-day things at work. And so that is usually my balancing act throughout my day is sort of like one-on-one coaching conversations, which are, as I said, everything from like, I'm trying to put a point of view together because it feels like the team is going with A, but everything we know suggests that B is just better for Twitter, better for people. How might I? And so that requires like a lot of like, I guess the easier job would be to just tell the person the answer, but I'm not doing their career justice, their growth justice. If I just say, well, you should do this. So it's a lot of like, okay, so what have you already considered? All because I want to coach them to be better and I want to prepare them to like take my job one day. So one-on-ones, I've started monthly meetups where anybody who's reached out to me externally and are just interested in like talking about career related things. It's often, young women of color, people from marginalized communities, I think, feel more comfortable reaching out to me. And so it's 4 to 5 people once a month and we just talk and share. And then I have these mentorship circles where it's people who are in Twitter who have somehow heard about me. They don't report into me, but want to talk. And so there are those that I have to I love them, but they're those that kind of pop up in my calendar. But I'm also in lots of conversations with leadership to review progress against initiatives that are important to driving the company forward. And sometimes those are, heated because we are dealing with a roadmap that we've agreed to for things we want to do in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of Black Lives Matter, in the midst of a lot of things that are manifesting on the platform. And so the conversations are interesting because it's a mix of here's what we plan to do. Here are a bunch of opinions because we're all feeling things because we work at Twitter, but also because we're people and we're all experiencing these things together these days. And then I think for me, I grapple with I wish I had the facts fast enough because you want to be able to interject and inject into those conversations fact so that we could make even more informed decisions. But it's becoming really difficult because everything's happening real time. So those happen also throughout the day. And then, I am in more one-on-ones, not just with people that I'm mentoring or people I'm coaching, but with leadership, because it's as important to me to maintain a relationship with the people I consider peers. Yeah. So these are, senior directors and VPs of product and engineering and design, because some of the things that we need to talk about are just structural in nature. How do we work better together? How do we ensure that decision-making is infused with the richness of people centricity from the beginning and not like in the middle.
Yeah.
And those are really fun conversations. But again, it sort of squeezes my day. So by the time I am done, it is 6:30. I think having kids forces me to have the cutoff because I'm like at that point in this room for the entirety of my day. I rush upstairs. I'm grateful for a partner who loves to cook and can be there for the girls. And we eat dinner, and I then look at Twitter again. I don't work now. It's more like, well, what's happening just like from a regular person point of view. And that's generally what my days look like. And it becomes really difficult to like keep up with friends and all that stuff. So I have work to do. This is the message to everybody. Because it's not ideal that, that I'm like in this mix so long. But to be honest with you, it's not that bad because, 9 to 6:30 is not a terrible schedule. I think it's just more pressure because I'm at home.
Yeah.
And so for my girls, they're just like, why are you not spending time with us? And I have to remind them if I was going into the office, I'd actually be coming home a little later than this.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a packed day. The addition of the morning walk has helped me overcome some of the like not calling my mom, not calling my sister, not calling my friends. And so I'm trying to use that time to both sort of collect my thoughts and like say a quick hi.
Yeah. Interesting.
Amazing
Yeah.
stuff. Amazing. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to touch on, you talked a bit about kind of being in a leadership role and the different challenges and things you experienced there. And obviously this podcast is called A Seat at the Tech Table, and Black women are increasingly getting seats at the highest tables in tech. There's still a lot of work to be done, but kind of gradually we're seeing more and more women in those positions. How do you think about yourself as a Black woman in a senior leadership role in tech? And what is your advice for those coming up behind you?
Wow. Yeah. This is a question that I think is wonderful because it allows me to just have an honest conversation around, I guess, identity. And there's a difference between like, the identity that you have or how you consider yourself and then how others see you. And I think throughout my life and my career, especially, I've been consistently reconciling the way I see myself and the way others see me. And I gave you the example earlier on where, heads down working, that's how I am. And my mentor saw in me leadership. Right. And so put me in places where I began to sort of like hone those skills. And then even further back than that, when I started working at Colgate, I still very much had in my head, like, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a dancer, like I create, I'm artsy, and like I kept the vibe of the artsiness. I shaved my hair, I had my nose ring. I was like in a sea of, often older white men. And it didn't even occur to me. I was just like, I'm going to continue being me because, this feels good. But I needed to go to life coaching because I was like, okay, but I'm doing well. So I'm very confused. How does an artsy person like do well in like super hyper corporate America? So this reconciliation is happening today. And so when asked the question, how does it feel? I think right now I'm still very much feeling honor, a tremendous amount of humility, and embracing the fact that I am this, Black woman from Trinidad and Tobago who is in a leadership position at a company that is shaping the conversation in the world and shaping culture. And so that I would be lying to you and the audience if I said, well, I already know that this is what I am and what I represent. So I'm still going through this process of like owning it fully. However, I will say it feels incredibly, I think I've used the word humbling a lot because I am very much somebody who shows up as Nikkia because like I can't be anybody else. And I think the one message that I've been trying to convey to Black women, men, people of color, anybody who sort of feels like they need to hide under some veil that is protective, that at least at Twitter, it is okay. I am here, rocking my Trinidadian accent and my funky hairdo, and like it is okay. And so I feel very much like that is my responsibility. Like I can't pretend to own anybody else's history. I could only speak to my struggle and how I have sort of made my way through the world and my career, and be really honest about it. And I hope that in being honest and saying, like, there were times when I didn't know. There were times when I did not have this vision. I'm so grateful to be here. And maybe in my subconscious, like, this is what I wanted, it manifested. But if you don't feel like that's okay. Feel no pressure. But the one thing that I can say with certainty is that, being yourself and even feeling awkward about being yourself is all fine. I want to just acknowledge that, like, that is a thing that, I'm trying to exhibit as a leader in the company. And I'm also just trying to give back, right? So I feel like personally responsible, even before this, as I told you, to be someone that you don't feel afraid to reach out to be accessible, because I have encountered this situation where people who look like me get to the top and it's like they've forgotten where they came from. And so I vow never to do that, right? Because I remember being, the young person who just graduated from grad school, and I was just like writing to people saying hi with all of my niceties, just like, hello, I just want to understand like what it is you do. I'm trying to learn, and like no response. And that's painful. And so if you can hold on to that, not that I'm, in pain right now, but it just made me say, I don't want to leave anybody hanging. I don't want to, have somebody who took the time to craft a message walk away from that interaction being like, wow, like, how do I get ahead? And so I show up in that way. And certainly want to convey a sense to Black people in tech, that things are changing, that there is a way forward. And yeah, it starts by reaching out and having conversations, listening to the podcast and hearing that, like, part of this journey has been just grit and persistence and resilience, and seeking out mentors who believed in you. It's not necessarily about being the most technically adept. And, although I know my craft, I think so much of the journey has been in like being able to talk to people, meet them where they're at, be someone trustworthy, show them that you're on the same team, same outcome. I happen to have research in my toolkit, but, I'm on Team Twitter. So long-winded answer to the question, but hopefully that gave some insight into, the reality of how I feel in this position.
Amazing. No, that's amazing.
Yeah. Ooh, great stuff. Okay. So moving on, I'm quite interested in finding out about your aspirations. So you earlier mentioned that you fairly recently joined Twitter. What are your aspirations, and what does success look like for you once there?
This is a great question for me, because, as I said before, I used to have these conversations with my manager in my old job, and I haven't necessarily had that here because I just started and had this opportunity to take on the job that I think I would have wanted if I really reflected on things earlier than expected. At this point in time, my aspirations professionally have started to take an interesting angle, I suppose, or take an interesting shape. I would dissect it into a couple of buckets. So one is I want Twitter to continue to thrive into the future by being known not only as the place to come for news and to connect with community and conversations that matter, but to be the leading company in the social media space when it comes to being reflective of the people who are on the platform. So, we still have a ways to go in creating a space internally that looks like the space that we are externally. And so I want to be part of that transformation. And so I can do that in my role, but I can certainly make sure that I'm part of conversations that have to do with recruitment and retention across the organization. And so that's something that I'm continuing to do, and it's exciting. I want to continue to shape a research team at Twitter that is seen as partners in the development of product, but also when it comes to making strategic decisions for the company. I want to be able to have a team that's constantly being consulted as sort of like the source of truth. Like, here's what we know. Here's why it's important. And so, again, that's a journey, and that's exciting because we have work to do. And so that sort of falls into the Twitter bucket. And then I think when it comes to me, I am beginning to have these conversations externally, and I love it. I've done my best to mentor on the side when people have reached out, but having conversations with the press, being interviewed in forums like this one, that is absolutely something that I think continues to tap into my creative side, right? Talking to people, having a conversation, moving an audience. And so, I'd love to speak on the TED Talk stage at one point. I'm not sure what I would talk about, but I do think that it's a fun aspiration to have. And to be able to sort of spread this message of mentorship, the importance of it, how do you overcome it, to also be somebody who I think young people can look at and say, vulnerability doesn't go away, right? Like, not because you become more senior or older means that you're fully self-actualized. You may be confident in certain aspects, but I think the hunger to want to improve is always there. And I want to be able to sort of tell that to people. And so more opportunities to speak, more opportunities to give back, I think would be the personal side of the aspiration question.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Okay, so kind of winding down, but I'm interested in so you've talked about your background in dance, you've talked about kind of some of the things you like to do and things you're passionate about. But obviously you have quite a high pressure job, a very intense kind of working life. What do you currently do to kind of unwind or find joy outside of kind of your working day?
Yeah. I mentioned that I started this sort of like morning walk. That's been helpful. Before the pandemic, I had like a couple things that I was doing. So I was taking 2 days off a week, not 2 days, working from home 2 days out of the week. And I started going to the gym in the morning. I blocked the morning, and I was excited to be taking classes because I am a product of the class environment. It's hard for me to just sort of like sit on a mat by myself and like do crunches. Yeah. So I was like, I need the environment. And the other thing that I do religiously is I'm home for Carnival every year.
Oh, wow.
It's a religious experience, though I'm not religious. It is a thing that I do with, like, it's freedom and joy, and what a wonderful thing to have in my culture. This opportunity to truly celebrate life with abandon for days on end. And so Carnival was like a marked thing in my calendar. In fact, I was home in Trinidad for a couple weeks, landed on the 29th of Feb because it was a leap year this year, right? It is a leap year this year. And then got the message from Twitter saying, don't come in, because, that was when we had started to sort of roll out the work from home guidelines for people who had traveled. So those are the things that I was doing. So we talk now in pre-COVID and post-COVID world. Now, with the increased pressure of the new job and working from home, it's been the walks. And I have been a huge fan. I'm going to just share this. You can't see anything. It's just like my handwriting. This is my gratitude journal.
Oh.
And every morning when I come back in after, I have breakfast with the kids, I literally just start the day with the question, today I am grateful for. And the day hasn't started, but it forces you to like find the sweetness and like the small things, and sort of like, the day could be feeling intensely stressful, but balance comes from being able to be like, well, I woke up, I had a cup of coffee, it was delicious. Luckily, I didn't feel any aches and pains, and it's as mundane and minute as that. And then I answered 2 other questions. Today I will feel more, and it could be relaxed, more in tune with my team, more curious. I kind of use the calendar for the day as a way to sort of guide that question. And then the last question is not question or prompt is, today I will feel more amazing by. And that sometimes it's like drinking more water. I don't drink enough water. So it's a combination of like that morning routine. And I've just started picking back up Pilates, but the Zoom experience is super weird. So it's Monday and Thursdays. I block an hour for lunch, which is when the session is. And that's helpful. So I think during the course of the week, the gratitude journal is important. And I actually don't even fill it out on the weekend, simply to orient my mind into a space of like grateful, positive energy.
Yes.
And I do it at the beginning of the day to set sort of intentions for how I want to feel, because I know the day is going to be not crap, but it's going to be just like intense back-to-back meetings. And I'm probably going to give of myself in a way that'll leave me feeling quite drained at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Weekends are interesting because it's really about like the family. And while I'm able to, and it's so funny, I'm able to sort of plan and be present for work, but it's like my brain on a weekend is like it's work. And so I rely pretty heavily on my partner's, planning skills. It's become really tricky to figure out like what to do during the course of a Saturday, because so much is closed and we're still very much thinking about safety and health. Yeah. But for me, it's often just like taking a walk, spending some time in the park. I've been like a city girl for a long time, but growing to appreciate just like trees. And so he's like, let's go on a hike. And I'm like, all right. And then once I'm there, I'm fine. But like the idea of it, and you know what I'm saying? It's like, okay. And then you're like, oh my goodness, trees. It's not that bad.
Yeah. I needed this. This is what I need.
Amazing. Well,
there was one more. I don't know if you asked about. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
No. Please.
More wisdom.
This is your stage. Go ahead.
No. I mean, I was just saying. I guess that the other thing that I've been, and this is not great. This is not like advice at all. But like at the end of the evening, I've been like closing my laptop, and you might be like, well, what does that have to do with anything? But the symbolism of closing a laptop, right? Like literally like closing the laptop and not having it open has been the trick that my brain needs to really disconnect. So, once I've like put the kids to bed and I'm upstairs and we're just like chilling, I'm on my phone and I'm consuming media like a normal person, but it is a change for me because I used to like reopen my laptop and like continue following up on things. But I also learned pretty early on from the mentor that I love so much, who's still a dear friend, no matter what you do, it'll still be there. Like literally like you this fake feeling that you have of accomplishment at the end of the day, honestly, you're always chasing it. But if you can come to terms and get comfortable with the fact that like it'll always be there, it enables you to sort of shut the laptop down and be okay with the fact that you have 50 unread messages, for example. So that's one other thing that I've been doing, and it's been really wonderful to just sort of shut the laptop, and then symbolically after I come back and I write in my journal, opening the laptop. And then the last thing is the prioritization matrix. And this is less about how I sort of like cope and deal with the stress, but it's more about how I not let everything feel like a fire. Because oftentimes when people come to you, it's their fire, but you have to step back when you have 100 of those fires and say, well, 40% of this is really small stuff. And so the prioritization matrix, which is basically, urgent versus importance. is a tool that I've been using for like 7 years now, for me to be able to be like 100% in on the things that are really important and urgent. And things that are not important and not urgent, I'm trying to find ways to delegate or, really just get comfortable with like not responding to it. And so that's been pretty helpful for me. And it's been something I've been trying to educate my team on, because everything does feel urgent and important right now. And you when you force yourself to say, okay, some things are urgent and important, and some things are important but not urgent, right? Like how can I get better at saying, okay, for the things that are important but not urgent, I'm going to block my calendar 2 weeks from now, half a day to take care of it. But it's okay, because I will be giving it the attention because it's important, but it's not a right now thing. And having the discipline to be able to sort of segment the things that you have to do between what's really important and urgent needs your attention, what's important but not urgent, you could tend to make the space. Mm-hmm. And then there's this like nebulous bucket of it is urgent but not important, right? You do those quickly. Try to find like space in your day to just sort of get those, but they're not that important. So you don't have to be perfect. It could be a little sloppy. And then the last bucket, which is not urgent, not important, you really need to try and figure out how to let go. And that's often our job. Let go.
Love it. No, that's such a helpful matrix even for me. I'm using that. I'm taking notes.
I'll add that to my toolkit. Yeah. Amazing. Oh my God, this has been so good.
I'm glad.
I've definitely gained so much from this. So I guess as we wrap up, please tell our guests where they can find more about you and some of your work online.
So you can find me, I guess, across Twitter and Instagram with the same handle, and that is at Nikkiastar. So it's Nikka star, STAR, NIKKASTAR. And you can search for me by my full name on LinkedIn. And, if you request friendship, I forget what you call it on LinkedIn, I'd be happy to engage there as well. But everything's open. Generally, if people reach out and there's like a good reason for reaching out, I'm quite responsive. But if it's just like, hey, delete. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm pretty, open, particularly on Twitter. I try to share, maybe not so much of like my personal life. I save that for Instagram, but my thoughts about leadership and showing up at work. And, it's more those lessons that I share on Twitter than, like a career in research. But I'm happy to talk about any of those topics: leadership, how to show up authentically, how to find a mentor, how to overcome barriers, and of course, careers in research.
Amazing stuff. So thank you so much for joining us at the Tech Table with Nikkia. Thank you so much for sharing your story and experiences with our listeners. We definitely wish you the best of luck, and we really, really look forward to hearing more about your journey at Twitter and just seeing the impact you have at that company and on the world. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, ladies. You guys are incredible. You're doing something wonderful for the world. Happy to be on again if ever there was the need, but I wish you guys nothing but the best as well. Thank you
so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today and listening to this episode of A Seat at the Tech Table. You can connect with us on our social media platforms. Just search @SistersInTech on Twitter and Instagram, and check out our website www.sistersin.tech to see what we've got going on. Don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes, and we'll bring you the next episode soon.